What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel video. Today, guys, we are going to be going over the new legend cards that are set to release in the Extra Transcend Power-Up Pack. I am very excited, as always, to be discussing these new legend cards with you guys, so without further ado, let's not waste any more time, and let's jump right into it. So the first legend card that we're going to be going over in this video is going to be the Warrior Returning Alive. It is a normal spell card with the requirement being none, and the effect is choose one monster warrior type in your graveyard and add it to your hand. And this is a very interesting effect. This is a very similar effect to Monster Reincarnation, which, funny enough, also is a legend card. So essentially, this is your second version of Monster Reincarnation, with the differences being that Monster Reincarnation is more diverse. You can really play it in any deck, but you actually have to discard a card in order to activate its effect. However, with this card, you don't have to pay a cost, but you can only play this in warrior decks, since you can only target warrior monsters with this effect, which I guess you can have some like hybrid with warrior monsters, I guess, but more than likely you're going to be playing this in a warrior based deck. And although this is a very cool card, it does kind of pose a question of, is it worth playing this card over Monster Reincarnation, or is it better to play Monster Reincarnation? Now, when it comes to any deck besides a warrior deck, then the choice is easy. It's always going to be Monster Reincarnation. It's diverse, so it makes sense that that card's going to be better than this one. But if you're playing a warrior deck, which one's better? Because you got to look at the prospect of, is it worth discarding that card from your hand for Monster Reincarnation's effect, which essentially can do the same thing as the Warrior Returning Alive, but with the Warrior Returning Alive, you get to keep that card that you essentially have to discard for Monster Reincarnation, which honestly, it's more of a preference, because discarding a card might not necessarily be the worst thing, because let's say you decide to do Monster Reincarnation, you get to discard a card, which allows you then to, when you go to your next draw phase, you can potentially draw an additional card because you had to discard that card. So let's say if you didn't have Monster Reincarnation and you had the Warrior Returning Alive, if you essentially had to keep that card in your hand, then you essentially only get to draw 4 cards during your next draw phase, and maybe that card isn't very helpful for you at that time. But with Monster Reincarnation, you can pitch that card that's not really useful right now, and you get to draw an additional card during your draw phase. So there are benefits to have it, but I can also argue for the Warrior Returning Alive, because it's essentially the opposite. If you have a very good hand and you have Monster Reincarnation, you have to essentially pitch one of your good cards to be able to get one of your materials back, which maybe that's not that big of a deal if I'm going to be honest, but if you play the Warrior Returning Alive, you get to keep everything, and you can probably have like an extra negate on the board or something like that if negates are really that problem. And I don't really know much about Rush Duels. I feel like I have to explain that in every one of these videos. So I can see there being an argument between these two. I feel like, in my opinion, from my experience from like the Master Rule format, I believe Monster Reincarnation is better than the Warrior Returning Alive, but I can understand an argument for the Warrior Returning Alive and not having to pitch that card, but that's just more if you think it's not really that big of a deal to pitch the card. Like I said earlier, you can essentially get an extra draw during your draw phase, and maybe it can help you get a dead card out of your hand. Like, that's just more of a preference thing, in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think of the Warrior Returning Alive. Do you think, in a warrior deck specifically, is it better to play this card, or if you're going to play a sort of effect like this, it would be better to play Monster Reincarnation? Would love to hear you guys' thoughts on that. Me personally, I would say Monster Reincarnation, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that as well. But with that being said, we're going to go into the final legend card for this video, which is a legend card that has not seen any sort of spotlight in over 15 years at this point, since it's been on the OCG and TCG ban list since essentially the beginning of the ban list. And that card is Graceful Charity, or known in the OCG as Angel's Gift. Its requirement is none, and its effect is draw 3 cards, then choose 2 cards from your hand and send them to the graveyard. So this card is very interesting. Now, when you look at a Master Rules perspective, this card is broken. I mean, just imagining this card in the Master Rule format in today's game with all the graveyard shenanigans that you can do in today's game, this card would just break the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or at least that's what it is in my opinion. In fact, I would believe this card would get emergency banned if this card was, for some reason, ever taken off of the OCG and TCG ban list. I mean, it was broken back in 2004. I mean, you use this card, you pitch powerful cards like Jinzo or your Blue Eyes White Dragon, use Monster Reborn, get them back into the field. Or another thing you can do is essentially you can pitch a Light and Dark to your graveyard, summon Chaos Emperor Dragon, nuke your opponent's entire hand and your opponent's board, summon Yata-Garasu since you haven't normal summon yet, and essentially Yata lock them from there. So yeah, Graceful Charity, especially with the cards in the Master Rule format, it's just broken. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when you look at the Rush Duel game, there's a different story. Now, I will say this, I still think the card is good, and the reason I say that is because I feel like there's a use for this card for essentially making your hand better. So let's just say your hand is not really the best, it can be a lot better, maybe you just have not the right pieces that you need for a combo you're trying to do. Well, you activate Graceful Charity, you draw your 3 cards, you essentially get the cards that are better for that scenario, or you get the perfect cards that you need. You send the 2 cards that you're probably not going to use during that turn to the graveyard, then you go from your plays there, and essentially you empty your hand out, because that's another benefit from Graceful Charity with something like Pot of Greed, because with Pot of Greed, you don't pitch any card, you draw 2 cards and potentially have the risk of not being able to get rid of your hand to have the capability of drawing 5 cards during your draw phase. But with Graceful Charity and being able to pitch 2 cards to the graveyard, you can dump your hand enough to where you can set up a pretty good board and potentially have an empty hand, so when you go into your draw phase, you can still draw 5 cards. Or what I think would be even funnier to do with this card as well is that if you activate Graceful Charity, you draw your cards, you get all your maximum pieces, then you just pitch 2 monsters to the graveyard, and boom, essentially in just one turn you can get your maximum cards to your field. So that's pretty cool from that perspective. But I can see the argument when it comes to this card of, is this card worth playing over cards like, I know Tribute to the Doom is pretty good in Rush Duels, I know Sakuretsu Armor is pretty good as well, and even Monster Reborn in that matter as well. So is it worth playing this card over some of the other legend cards, since with legend cards, you can only have 1 legend card in your deck. Not 1 copy, just 1 legend card in total. So would you waste your legend spot on Graceful Charity than something like a Monster Reborn or Sakuretsu Armor? Now, I think there are good aspects to Graceful Charity, but I can see the argument to play the other cards. I mean, Monster Reborn is just really good. Tribute to the Doom is removal, which is very nice to have, and Sakuretsu Armor is its own, removal. So there are very good arguments to play these cards over Graceful Charity, but I still think Graceful Charity is a card that I feel like is worth looking at, because it essentially can help you get to your plays a little bit easier, and because of discarding cards, it's not essentially clogging your hand, which is a problem with drawing cards in Rush Duel, since you won't get the benefit of drawing 5 cards during your draw phase. So I do think there is a benefit of playing Graceful Charity, but I can see the argument of why you wouldn't play this card over stuff like Monster Reborn in Tribute to the Doom. But obviously, that's just my opinion. But with that being said, that's going to be it for the Legend cards. Just a quick general thoughts on these 2 cards. I think they're pretty cool additions to the Rush Duel game. Not really surprised of them coming to the game. After all, we saw them in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's anime, as Yuga, the main protagonist, used Graceful Charity as his Legend card, and Yuka Goha, who was one of the antagonists of the current arc in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's anime, which is the Goha 6 sibling arc, used the Warrior Returning Alive in her deck as her legend card. So this was more of the case of when these cards were going to come to the Rush Duel game rather than if these cards were going to come to the Rush Duel game. But I still think they're pretty cool additions to it. Definitely my favorite has to go to Graceful Charity, though. I mean, we have not seen that card in over 15 years at this point, which, to be fair, the Warrior Returning Alive has been a card we haven't seen in a very long time as well. The last time I remember seeing the Warrior Returning Alive was in GX when Judai and Asuka both used it in their decks, since they did play Warrior cards. But other than that, that was probably the last time I ever seen that card. I mean, I haven't barely seen that card in the Master Rule format in today's game, because honestly, it's not really that good in the Master Rule format. But Graceful Charity is just cool for the fact that we have not seen that card in 15 years, with that card being banned, and being able to play that again to any sort of capacity is really cool as well. But with that being said, that is going to be it for this Rush Duel video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your guys' thoughts on these two new legend cards. Do you think these two legend cards are good? Do you think they're okay? Or do you not think they're really that good? Let me know, out of these two legend cards, what is your favorite legend card? And let me know in the comments as well, what legend card do you want to see come to the Rush Duel game? I would love to know your guys' thoughts on all of this down below. But with that being said, that is going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, guys, take care and have yourselves a great rest of your day.